How much is that? Welcome to the Podcast Editors Mastermind, the only show dedicated to the business side of podcast editing. I am Daniel What's my name?
Who are you?
I am Daniel Abendroth. You can find me at rothmedia.audio.
I'm Brian Ensminger. You can find me at toptieraudio.com.
And our delightful guest this evening is Helen King. She is a Kiwi podcaster who launched her podcast, The C Word Radio, in July of 2020 and was a finalist in the New Zealand Radio Awards less than a year after launching. A former journalist, Helen took a leap of faith and started her own business, HK Productions, offering podcast management and editing services in October of 2020. She was motivated by a diagnosis with breast cancer at 37 in 2018 and being diagnosed with ADHD a few months shy of turning 40 last year to carve out work that complements her ADHD. Helen lives in Auckland, New Zealand with her partner Ross, Grumpy Cat Bebe?
Bebe.
Am I saying? And two naughty dogs, Lenny and Koki, who we are likely to hear tonight. Helen, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I apologize in advance if the dogs make an appearance.
A running theme of this show is interruptions by animals. Normally it's cats, so actually having a dog might be a change of pace. A nice little change of pace for us.
I was thinking about picking up a goat just so we could have a little bit of variety.
One of those screaming goats.
Yeah, the ones that fall over when you yell at them.
Yes.
Okay, I got to stop.
So, Helen, the main topic that we're going to cover tonight is getting started as a podcast editor in a growing market. But in just kind of our correspondence, like how you got into podcast editing is really fascinating. So can we talk about that for just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started my podcast last year. The idea kind of grew during lockdown here in New Zealand. So we went into full lockdown in around about March, and everyone we had a nationwide flour shortage because people were just like making bread and baking and things, and I cannot make bread, so I needed something to do, and just this idea started forming, and so that's kind of the genesis of the C Word Radio. And it actually goes out on a community radio station here in Auckland called Planet FM. And I guess it was just like a way back to my roots in radio where I started, about 14 years ago. And it just really pulled together everything I love about journalism and working with audio. And then fast forward a few months later, I, like so many women, was diagnosed with ADHD after going through lockdown because it just sort of exacerbated the symptoms and things. And I was a guest on a podcast called Adulting with ADHD. And I mentioned at the time that, I loved podcasting and I wanted to edit for other people. And she's just like, I'm looking for an editor. And that's how I got my first client, was just by being on the show. So it was a strange way into it, I think.
I just have to ask. So everybody else is out there making bread or doing whatever, and you thought to yourself, "Hey, I'd like to start are you a masochist? What made you think I should do this?"
I'm just a little weird. I don't do things sort of by the book or in the sort of usual way. I think what motivated me was that, as you mentioned before, I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 37. And so that was in around about May of 2018. And like a lot of people when they're younger, when they're diagnosed, it was a very aggressive cancer. And so my treatment was very aggressive, and I all up had 18 months of treatment for cancer. And what they don't tell you about going through a cancer diagnosis is that it's actually sometimes harder once you come out the other end and the oncologist sort of signs you off and says, right, now you can go live your life. And you're like, what? But I'm a mess. What do you mean go and live your life? I can't do this. I'm bald. And so I guess I had really been struggling to find a place which was telling my story or a story that I related to. And so I thought, well, why not start something and provide a space for people to really, talk about what it's like to have a cancer diagnosis or have a loved one that goes through cancer. And so, that kind of was how I started, and definitely haven't done anything by the book, or I've made many mistakes along the way, but that kind of kick-started it.
Yeah, but I love that, because that kind of provides what a support group might do in a different forum, right? So you can connect with people that aren't in the same town necessarily, and have that camaraderie. I don't want to say commiseration, because I don't think it's really that, but like that knowing that there's somebody else there that gets you. That's a really big thing.
And for a topic that is almost kind of taboo, because it's people like. I say this never having cancer, but I do have a client who also has a show about breast cancer and like as a survivor. And it's just like people outside the community, like people don't want to talk about cancer because it's so scary. And so it can kind of like isolate people that have gone through or are going through it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that was part of it for me was anyone who's been through cancer treatment will know that when you they give you steroids basically before you have your infusion, and they just you go mental. You really do. Like, steroids are not a good time. And so often you'd still be awake at 3:00 in the morning, just sort of, and that's never a good time for anyone to still be awake alone with your thoughts at 3 a.m. And I found this podcast made by the BBC called You, Me and the Big C. And it was these 3 women talking about their cancer experiences. And I guess, for that half hour or 45 minutes, I didn't feel so alone, or I kind of, it was reassuring. And so I guess part of it was wanting to sort of create that for other people that, at 3 a.m. they might come across the podcast and feel like they're not so alone in what they're going through.
It's interesting to me that was your first show, and then your first client is another person who, based on the title of the show, seems to be supporting another community in a similar way. Was that a through line that you were looking for? How did that, I'll stop and let you answer.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not consciously at first, but definitely I prefer working with people who, I guess, who are passionate and are wanting to sort of make a change, whether that is, empowering other people in a different way or serving their community. And I think that's what I sort of, attract. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Warren said it really well. And the podcast can reach others who listen later. The connections keep spreading. Podcasts help people feel less alone.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's one of the magical things about podcasting is, like, I say it all the time, like that intimacy. It just feels like so much more intimate to listen to a podcast than it is to like watch a YouTube video or something else. Like there is like that deep, almost like relationship in a weird way that's very one-sided of a listener to the host.
I think so. And it's funny you say that, because I had a conversation about this recently with a woman who has just started her podcast, and someone asked about YouTube. And I think that YouTube for me is when I'm sitting down and I'm just scrolling, and I might check in with a YouTuber that I follow or look up a particular topic. And it's more sort of, a static thing. But when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm often doing something else. And so it's almost like that person's in the room with you, or you're connecting in, or, you know, I'm washing the dishes and having some company by listening to a true crime, you know.
Completely off topic.
Yeah.
But my wife and I, we actually with dinner, we watched a show called Only Murders in the Building. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah.
So it's a new show on Hulu. It's Martin Short, Steve Martin, and Selena Gomez, and they're like true crime podcast fanatics. And there's a murder in their building, so they start a podcast about the murder in their building.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know why
I
that
love
popped in, but there you go.
It made me think, because if I think about when I first started listening to podcasts was a while ago. It was when it's gone out of my head, but there was that fantastic one, Serial, and you know, and this shows how New Zealand's technology industry works. But I used up all my data on my cell phone listening to that. It must have been about 10 years ago, because I couldn't stop listening to it. And that was my first sort of introduction of, you know, being able to really binge something or, you know, you're just sort of there with that person. And I think that it's such an exciting medium in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like how when I'm doing a podcast, even this, where we're still on video, I feel less pressure to perform or to put on a persona than if I do even just a YouTube walkthrough video. For some reason, there's a different pressure when I feel like I need to perform a thing rather than just show up and be me in a professional-ish way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the pandemic has really changed. I mean, it's changed everything. And I think that that's what people will slowly come to realize, is that there is no going back to pre-pandemic life. And, you know, the way that we connect with people, especially here in New Zealand. I mean, in Auckland, we've been in lockdown for almost 3 months. And so, yeah, it's like, you don't see people, you don't interact with people. But I think that when we create spaces for people to connect, whether it's on a podcast or maybe an online community, you're really allowing for a connection that we just miss when we can't go out and see people. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was going to get back to podcast editing as a profession, but if you have something...
Well, it was related to that, right? Because you mentioned your first client, you were a guest on their show. So, like, is that how you find all of your clients? Is your first a guest on their show, and then they say, hey, you should edit? Like, what does that look like?
No. So, yeah, it's been really interesting. So my Sarah is my first client, and I still edit her show and do her social media and things like that. We've got a really good working relationship. And I produced a short podcast series earlier this year for a charity here in New Zealand. And they had heard my podcast and approached me to make them one. So, you know, for me, my podcast really feels like the best example of what I can do. And yes, I've picked people up that way. But recently I found LinkedIn is a really fantastic way to connect in with people. And I've had maybe 3 inquiries that have all led to some, you know, different services through LinkedIn. And because I think it's quite an underutilized source, but it seems to really work.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the back of my head, like, because like my clients, I think, are really big on LinkedIn, but it's just like, I don't know. I don't enjoy using, maybe we should have like a LinkedIn expert.
I'd love to have a LinkedIn intervention right now, because it's not my favorite, but to Helen's point and yours, like the clients are there.
Yeah.
How do you make it work for you? Because to me, it feels like a total energy suck, not just time, but like I feel an emotional barrier to even clicking over and waiting for that page to load, which is of course the fastest thing that's ever loaded. And then clicking the bell that has all the notifications of the things that LinkedIn wants me to see, that have not, like, getting through all of that to go, okay, what are the two things I need to do? Like, how do you make LinkedIn work for you?
Okay, so I learned this from editing a podcast episode with a LinkedIn expert. It was amazing. You know, when you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't believe someone knows all of these things. So, but basically what she said is that all you have to do is spend 20 minutes a week on it, and you can just do 5 minutes a day. And the first thing has been to build up your networks. And so you click on everyone you know in terms of maybe colleagues or people you've worked with. And then the next one might be university or school or people from your town and that sort of thing. And so that's what I started doing, is that I just kept building up those connections. And then the other piece of information from this house, she said that it's something ridiculous, like 5% of people actually produce content on LinkedIn. And so especially things with video or, something more interactive. And so the chance of your stuff being seen is quite high. And so what I've started doing is that, I definitely building up the network side of things. And then maybe weekly I'll post something. So it might be about my podcast, or I get industry news and I put a New Zealand spin on it, or I do blog posts and things like that. And so I'm not spending heaps of time on LinkedIn, but I'm spending enough time on there that things, it looks like I, am regular and that sort of thing. Yeah. There's nothing you can't learn from a podcast. Let's face it.
Yes. I may have been taking notes while you talked through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because my hang up is like I'm always getting like emails or messages from people that are like, hey, I think we need to connect. And it's like, we have nothing to do with each other. And they're just trying to sell me whatever their irrelevant service is.
Mm. Yeah, it is a bit weird like that. But I just sort of ignore that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think when we're listening to this podcast episode, it really was about making it work for you. So I could do 5 minutes a day. I could, write about what I know and kind of, sort of grow your expertise in that area. Because I think that's the thing, is that with podcasting, it is such a, especially for independent podcasters, it's such a new space, especially in New Zealand, that people want that information. They want to know, well, how do you do it? Or what do these numbers mean? Or, that sort of thing. So I feel like there's such a good opening there to sort of slot yourself in as the expert. You don't look convinced.
No, it's processing. I guess it's probably just like my own limiting beliefs and self-doubt and imposter syndrome that's like, but there's so many experts that are already doing that. Like why would anybody listen to me?
Yeah, but I'd like to say that a high percentage of the expert entrepreneurs that I find on LinkedIn aren't too far off from the self-proclaimed Facebook experts who have never actually done the thing that they're selling the course to do. Like maybe they bought somebody's private label rights thing so that they have an ebook that they can sell. And maybe they read the 3 most popular books on the topic so that they can talk about it. But from my experience, I can tell you that there is absolutely a difference between somebody who understands conceptually what somebody else said to do and somebody who's worked through it and knows what actually works and has at least enough of a grasp to be able to pivot on it. And you have that between you and Michelle. Like, I mean, because you guys are almost a full service agency, the two of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking like that could be like really good for my Reaper for podcasting content.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. This has been great. I got work to do. Thank you.
No, we got 30 minutes left. You can't leave yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
But to your point, Warren just said in the chat, I should take snippets from my Hindenburg course and posted those to LinkedIn as trailers or something. Yeah, that's something I'd never thought about, Warren. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what prompted.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. It's because so recently Triton are now producing podcast stats for New Zealand. Previously we weren't involved, but now because podcasting is growing and the major media companies are obviously paying for the service, and so there was this press release about here are the top podcasts and things. And so because I'm suspicious of everything, I had a look at these stats and I thought they only tell one part of the picture. And so I wrote about that. And I think that's the thing, is that we do know the independent side of things. And being able to kind of express that is always going to be interesting to someone. And I think at the moment with New Zealand and podcasting is that it could be really easy to look at something like that and go, whoa, I'd never get those downloads. But then you look at the fact that they're all being produced by our major media outlets. And actually, a lot of them were just repurposed radio shows. So, it's a different ball game when you're creating a podcast for your business or creating a podcast for a special interest. So I think that there's a lot we can offer that doesn't always get that attention.
Yeah. And to your point, I think also the why behind your show can be a big part of it, right? If you want to make a difference for people that have dealt with cancer, that's not a small market, but it's not a mass market, right? You're not making a show for everybody. You're making a show for these people.
Masses.
I was talking to somebody yesterday who's got a show where his show is 100% about networking. His show is about the guest and the audience is a bonus because he wants to meet guests, have that conversation. And in some cases, maybe there's a business relationship that comes out of that. In others, it's just him expanding his network in a way that he's comfortable with. I relate to that. I hate networking events where everybody just pushes business cards in your face. I love spending 30 minutes with somebody to talk about whatever they care about. Like, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if there's an end where I can say, sorry, we're out of time. And also you're boring. So
yes. That's okay.
Sorry, Daniel. I think I might have interrupted.
No, it's just kind of like, I'm just echoing that because I have a client that pretty much does the same thing. The point of his show is to get people on. They tell him about their business, and at the end of the interview, he then pitches his service. And they just told him everything, all their pain points, so that he would just use that right back on them to sell to him. And like you said, like the audience is just a bonus. Because you don't need huge numbers to get the right guest, because people love talking about what they're doing and what themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And with the right guests, as you're building your network, you can say, so-and-so suggested I talk to you about being on my show. And then it's not a conversation about, I want to have you on here because I've got a zillion listeners. It's, I was talking to Bob the other day about his business, and he mentioned, hey, you would be a great guest because of this thing about your business. It really gives you a way to shift it. Of course, then you tend to get people that are not as interested in the audio quality as guests, which is a challenge as an editor.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. It's so
and even as like a podcast editors, I mean, this is how you pitch to small businesses or service providers, like sell them on like starting a podcast because you have your own product. And you're talking to your potential clients.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing in terms of, because I've done corporate communications, and I think that's what people are just starting to realize more in Australia and New Zealand, that because we can't go out and do those networking events or things are changing, it really can become just another branch of your comms strategy. And it's actually a very user-friendly one and a very cost-effective one, because a podcast episode can become a blog, and then it can become, 6 social media posts and, all those sorts of things. And so it's that switch from looking at success and measurements by numbers and then looking at as how am I achieving, in terms of am I getting a new client through this, or am I reaching more people? And so I think there's a lot of room for growth in that area.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, I don't know what insight you'll have. I'm really curious about like what the kind of indie podcast scene is like in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's definitely growing, and I think that there are people that have been podcasting for a while. There's a wonderful woman down in sort of the central part of the North Island, and she lives off grid, and she's been podcasting for about 6 years, and she podcasts about her life, and she also I think it's called Mike Her, and she has created this library about how different, especially more feminine or female voices sound on different microphones. And so before you go and invest in a podcast mic, you can listen to how your voice might sound. So there are, little pockets of people that have been podcasting for a while in quite sort of niche areas. So it's definitely a more growing industry in terms of that. But I think the thing about New Zealand is that it's kind of, in some ways, a shift for us, because we've always been very big radio listeners. I think per capita, we're one of the highest sort of consumers of radio content. And so to get people sort of more listening to podcasts, it's going to be a little bit of a shift into, I guess, that more of an online or streaming access, which we are seeing. And it's definitely in our younger generation that are tuning more and more into either, online or different services and stuff. So I think that it's going to be sort of a younger generation that perhaps really, get into that indie side of podcasting.
One of the things I'm wondering, because you mentioned that New Zealand is a developing market, do you find that you have to spend a lot of time sort of explaining or selling to potential clients why they should consider having a podcast as compared to why they should hire you to do it?
Not so much. So I'm fairly lucky that the people who approached me have, actually, strangely enough, or funnily enough, it's been expat Americans that are now living in New Zealand that I'm sort of one of my clients at the moment.
Oh, nice.
So I don't know whether that's because it's different, but I think the challenge is selling the benefits of having someone produce and edit your podcast. Because I think for a lot of people, they maybe not quite, I don't know. I guess it's that thing of how good do you want things to sound, or do you want, do you send it out? And so for the people that have approached me, I haven't necessarily had to sell the benefit, but I can definitely, there's not a huge demand for it just yet, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I have more luck with getting clients that are in America than I do in New Zealand at the moment. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess that makes a lot of sense because like podcasting, how do you find your American clients?
Generally just through networking. And so I was freelancing or contracting with a woman for a few months, and then she changed her business. And so I took one of the clients that I had been editing. So she came with me. And then, some of it's just been word of mouth. Actually, before I came on today, I just got an email from a woman in the States that is a friend of a friend who had said, oh, such and such mentioned that you're editing podcasts, and this is something I want to do. So that's that for me has been another huge way of, finding clients, is just building up those networks, and really just letting everyone know that this is what I'm doing. And so at some point they might have a conversation with someone who says, I want to start a podcast. And they're like, someone told me they were doing this, and it will be me.
I love it.
Yeah.
Because you're not being like sleazy and like just selling yourself constantly. You're building like genuine relationships and just kind of like just putting your awesome stuff out there and then just kind of letting people come to you.
Yeah. And it's because it's a funny one, because I've been working with a social media coach, because I met her through a forum here in New Zealand, like for women who have small businesses. And I think part of it is because we were talking about what makes you want to pay for something, or what makes you, I guess, engage in that sort of thing. Because that's always the hardest thing, isn't it? Being a small business is thinking, how do I get people to want to, pay me to do things? And I guess it's that thing of not everyone will. And so that's okay. Then they're not your people. But it's just really, believing that what you're doing, someone will want, and they will want to work with you because what you have is, aligns with where they are and what they want. And so, I guess for me, I'm very much a relationship-based person. And so that's how I sort of have gone about, networking with people who might know someone or recommend me or,
Yeah. And that's like putting like just kind of like just networking. That person might not be your person right now, but they could be, in a year, or they know somebody who is your person.
Yeah, completely. And I think part of it also is I don't love in-person interactions. I just, I'm an introvert. And so, it's sort of, I've got a maybe hour limit, and then, my attention span somewhere else. And so I feel like what the pandemic has done is it's gone, here's your ultimate way of interacting with people, whether it's like online and having chats and things like that. So, I feel like even though the world feels like it's a dumpster fire, there are these little things where it's like, it's my time. This is my ultimate.
Yeah. I mean, half the world now knows how to actually do a Zoom call. They might do it poorly, but they know how. So like, this is perfect for people that would rather stay at home and maybe interact with other people like once a week, once a month, not, 9 hours a day, every day, which is me. I'd rather stay home.
Yeah.
One of the things I've kind of been wondering, because you were talking about how your clients tend to be people that are serving a specific purpose. But you're also, I think, typically businesses as well. Like they kind of do both. I'm wondering how much do you think about your sales conversation might be their desire to invest to see the change that they want to see in the world, rather than just looking at a balance sheet and saying, well, if I pay an editor, then it will save me, $100 a month of my time or something.
Yeah, I think that I don't know what that word would be, like it's social investment, or that, it being how invested they are in it and what it means to them is quite a big thing. Because, I think about adulting with ADHD, which has just exploded in downloads. Even, downloads aren't everything, but I feel like what Sarah talks about on her podcast is really neat. Like she's really niched it down, and that is really working. But equally, one of my other clients, Jen, who's in Chicago, is really passionate about empowering women in the workplace, because she's experienced burnout. And so, sorry, this is my very roundabout way of saying that I think that once I really started to think, well, this is what I want to work with, people kind of get drawn to that, and you start getting more confident in saying, I don't want to work with that person, or I'm not going to drop my prices, or, you know, maybe that's not for me. Yeah. So it's actually been listening to you guys and your different guests where, you know, I started thinking about, this is what I need to make, or, you know, I don't have to work with everyone. And so it's kind of been about getting quite clear on, you know, my values and how that sort of corresponds to how I want to work. Yeah. But I definitely think there has to be that investment on their side. And I think that for people that are really committed to doing a podcast, and once they start, they sort of realize how much work it is. They become more open to thinking, actually, I need to outsource this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also wanted to say part of the reason I asked the question is because I'm always doing the same thing you said you're doing by listening to these episodes. I'm trying to go, okay, like this is actually for me. How can I think about this differently? Or like, I've got this hypothesis. Has somebody else already proven it? So I don't have to go out and spend a ton of time doing it.
Yeah. And I think, because one of the things that has been really important for me is that, you know, I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. So I was almost 40 before I finally got the missing piece. And so, you know, my story is not unique for women of my generation. We've gone grossly underdiagnosed, and the impact on your life can be, you know, it can be really damaging, you know. But now knowing that my brain is a little bit different and that I do not fit in the corporate 9-to-5 world, it's not my place. It's not where I thrive. Because my cycle was to work and then burn out, work and then burn out. And that is really common for people that are undiagnosed with either autism or ADHD. And so, yeah, it must have been last year. And I just had this epiphany. And it sounds so cheesy, but sitting at the traffic lights one night, and I was thinking, if my cancer comes back in 10 years' time, what do I want to look back on? Do I want to look back and think, oh, you kept trying to work in these places that you don't fit? Or do you want to create a space for yourself where it's okay that you have ADHD and that you can manage that in the day because you work from home and you work in something you love and that you know, that really drives you? And I've been very lucky that I've been able to make that decision and create a space for myself where I can, actually thrive instead of continually feeling like I just don't fit into this place.
It's interesting you say that, because it's about every couple of months I think to myself, a few years, 10 years, 50 years, whatever, when my kids bury me, what do I want them to think, right?
Yeah.
What do I want them to think about me? And I don't mean that like, did he love me or not? I mean, like, when they look back on my life, beyond just he loved his family, what do I want them to think about me? And am I doing that thing? Right. So do I want them to think he was all about the money, or do I want them to think he really wanted to help people do something? Right. Because that's what I want. Like, it's not that I want them to be poor, but that's the thing I want them to carry through their life. So if I don't live my life that way, they won't look back on that, which means I didn't leave it in their life for them to leave in their kids.
Yeah, because I don't know about your parents, but my parents are baby boomers. And so they were in a job for 30 years. You know, they were in that job. That was the job you had. Then, you know, you became bitter and
my dad's been in the
twisted
same job since I was 3 or 4 until now, and I'll be 49 this year. So he's been in that job for a while, right?
Yeah.
And for me, up until the job I've got right now, like 5 years was my limit.
Yeah. And so I feel like there's part of that is that we have been given that template. If you stay in your job, it doesn't matter how crap it is, you just stay in it. But I'm the same. As I think I just cannot waste any more of my life doing things that just are soul destroying. But I I have to, I mean, I'm very lucky that I can do it because I have a partner that supports me, you know, and he has made it possible for me to, you know, give this business a good go. And, you know, I'm not going to be on Instagram anytime soon trying to tell you how to make a 6-figure business. That's not what I'm doing.
I'd be happy for like a high 5-figure business at this point.
Yeah, I'm just happy that people pay me. I'm not going to be that person anytime soon.
You say that, but maybe, right? I mean, is there a reason you couldn't be that person?
I don't know. Maybe. I think at the moment I'm just, I mean, I go through ebbs and flows of it where I did this the other day where I panicked and I thought, I'm not making enough money. I'm such a terrible person. And so I applied for a job and I did 2 interviews for it and I got to the end and I thought, I don't want to work in this place. What am I doing? And so I do continually go through phases of questioning myself and, oh my God, what am I doing? But it's just sort of unlearning all those years of, you know, a different script in my head. But I'm really lucky now that I am in a position where I can set something up for myself that means that I really honor my wellness and how I function, and I don't have to get up and take a bus to work. And
what's that difference been? So I'm not super familiar with ADHD, except that TikTok says I have it.
Well, they would know.
Yeah, they have that algorithm that pins you down. So I guess like looking back at, you know, working the 9 to 5, doing that burnout cycle versus like, how does podcast editing play into the strengths of your ADHD?
I think so. I really like it for us. It's terrible. One of the things with ADHD is that you don't produce dopamine, you know, the feel good chemical. And so doing things that you don't enjoy can actually feel like painful and really, really hard. But I feel like I love working with audio and I don't know every fancy technical thing and that sort of stuff at all. But for me, it's this amazing opportunity to listen to interesting conversations and create something and help other people do that. But on the other side of that is, because, you know, I'm only 3 years post-diagnosis and really only 2 years post-active treatment for cancer. And so I'm recovering, you know, I'm still recovering my energy levels, my, you know, everything. And so it just has opened up a space where I can prioritize not having any stress of having to be at work at this time with your computer on. And, you know, I can go out like I did today and take my dogs for a walk in the forest. And that's really good for me. And I think as well, not having to mask who I am for 8 hours a day in an office where, like, I mean, my dogs don't care who I am. You know? And so it's kind of embracing that I work in fits and starts. I'm not a consistently, you know, I can't just sit every day for this long and do work all the time. I have these sort of ebbs and flows. And so I can kind of work with that, which I actually think would work for everyone. You know, we all have such different sort of rhythms and stuff. Yeah.
No, there's a ton of research that says, you know, trying to do an 8-hour block nonstop is terrible, that you might get, you know, 2 hours of good work out of that. Whereas if you take even reasonably regular breaks, you'll get a full, like, way more done in less time, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in
absolutely.
school, like to the learning study habit. And it's like take a 5-minute break every hour. But it's like in a 9 to 5, you get your like 2 15-minute breaks a day plus lunch if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Oh, I just drink a lot of water, so I have to go back and forth to
No.
I mean, you laugh,
Yeah.
but like when because I do work a day job, I get my best ideas when I'm trying to solve a problem if I just step away from my desk for a minute and think about it. Like it wasn't that I wasn't thinking about it at my desk, but something about moving just a little bit is enough to go, I could do it this way.
Yeah.
It's so crazy you say that. So like something I'm now realizing I need to kind of work on is like, because I kind of push myself into like working large chunks like as a podcast editor. But like telling myself it's okay to take a break and not like make myself feel guilty. Like I should be working. Like I need to like do this, client's expecting blah, blah, blah. Because like in the afternoons, like I get tired and it's just like, I can't focus. And then like, so I'll go take a nap, which is really nice being able to take a nap in the middle of the day. But sometimes like I won't take a nap. I'll just like go lay down and not be able to sleep. But even that is just like rejuvenating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I keep coming back to is editing seems like a very mechanical task, right? But it is creative, even though you're taking somebody else's work and doing something with it. Even if all you're doing is cutting the ums, there's an amount of creativity that goes into that where you have to go, does what I did sound right?
Exactly.
Does what I did change? And that's all high level brain function, even though it looks like you're just clicking a mouse and going on. And it's fast, like your brain's constantly going. You got to rest.
Yeah. And that's the thing with ADHD is our brains are going fast. It's just, I mean, I had no idea that not everyone had a constant like dialogue in their head 24/7. It just does not shut up.
People don't have that?
all the time. Yeah, apparently. I can't, it's like, what do you mean? But and so I think that's why it works for me. It is quick. It's kind of got immediate effect. And so that instant gratification thing for me is very important. But sort of backtracking a little bit, when I was going through chemo, and of course you always think, well, how on earth did I get to this point? I'm 37. This is insane. And there was part of me that knew that the way that I had been living was not good for me. That constant pressure to succeed, that constant pressure to be doing this, this, and this. And it just has been, I guess, a lesson over the past 3 years over and over again of you need to slow down. You need to slow down. You need to, start prioritizing different things. But that goes against what we're taught. And so it's quite hard to embrace that at all times and not fall back into that thing of, oh my God, I need a job, a proper job. Yes.
Yeah. I know, like sometimes, like I'll have that thought too. It's like I don't know, like not so much recently, but it's just like when I think about like if I need to like actually get a traditional job for whatever reason, like it just fills me with dread. Like I can't imagine going back to that. Sorry, Brian.
It's okay. I mean, for what it's worth, I don't dislike my job. And I'm pretty good at it. I mean, they keep paying me, so I must be at least average.
Excellent.
I mean, I guess it's probably easy to be average if there's only one person in the role in the entire company, but
hey, you're the best one in the company.
Best and worst.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the other thing is, for me, this podcast that we are recording at the moment has been like something for me it's been, what do you call it? God, my brain's gone blank. So this is my ADHD, completely forgetting what I'm talking about. But it has been kind of appointment viewing for me because we've been in lockdown, but it's been a way for me to connect with my people, is that you guys are doing what I do. And so being able to know that every couple of weeks I can sort of log on and talk about what I do, or, for me, so many amazing women and people, Carrie and through Just Busters, and just networking in that way with people that I wish didn't live overseas, but you're all in America and other exciting places. But it's kind of like being a little kid going, oh my God, I found my people. And so it's pretty awesome in that way.
Yeah, to me, it's almost like being a kid and going to summer camp. You go, okay, this is where I get to hook up with my friends, and not hook up in that creepy way, just like this is where I get to meet my friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, gone silent.
Yeah.
This is where we put in the awkward pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm out of questions, but this has been amazing.
Yeah. Welcome to today's intervention where Brian got therapy.
Yeah.
We all did. Did.
No, this was good.
Yeah. Well, Helen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I believe we do have a Poddex question tonight.
We do have a Poddex question of the day. We actually have a pod deck. And before our call, Helen chose the card. She didn't get to choose the question, though, just the card. And if you're following us live, type your answer into the chat as well. The question for today is, if you could send a message to the entire world, what would you say in 30 seconds? I'll go first because I read the question. Mine will take way less than 30 seconds. Stop fighting and start listening. That's what I'd say. Daniel, how about you? Whichever side you're on.
I knew this entire time this was coming. I'm still trying to figure out how to word it. You have a message, so be sure to spread it, and nobody is judging you as much as you're judging yourself. But if you have something to say it kindly, though.
And also stop farting.
Yeah. Oh, I still don't know. My mind goes completely blank because you both have said something so, lovely, inspiring. And then I'm instantly like, stop being dicks. Just stop it.
I mean, that isn't completely different from mine.
Just be nice to each other.
Yes.
For God's sakes. Yeah. Yes, I say that from almost 3 months in lockdown, and I just wish people would get over themselves and, make it so we can all go outside again. Yeah.
Warren says in the chat, we have much more in common than it seems. Listen and discover those things. I like that. Thanks, Warren.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. I can't say it enough. Helen, if people want to find you or listen to your podcast, where can they do that?
Yeah. So, if you have cancer or anyone is dealing with it, it's the C Word Radio. You can come find me on Instagram, or to listen to the podcast across all the major podcast platforms. Otherwise, for my work stuff, I'm at HK Productions. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. And whenever this does come out as a podcast, we will have links in the show notes, so be sure to check it out there. Yeah. And we'll go ahead and drop it in the comments. So if you are watching this live or watching the replay on Facebook, we'll put all of our links in the comments as well. Now my mind is drawing a blank.
I think we probably need to talk about guests.
Yeah. Brian, if people want to be a guest.
Yeah. So if you've been listening to Helen and you've been thinking, you know what, I think I would like to get on and share my story as well. If you're a podcast editor and you've got maybe some insight and you're going, these people, they totally need to know what I know. Or if you're thinking, hey, I've got a problem with my business, but these people might help me ask a couple of good questions that'll point me in the right direction, we would love to have you let us know that you're interested in being on the show. To do that, you would go to podcasteditorsmastermind.com/be a guest. I'm looking for the link. There it is. And you would fill out the little form there. It's just a few questions to let us know what you might want to talk about. And that will go to Daniel. and we'll get back to you about potentially being on the show, and yeah, see if we can get you scheduled. So this is the least professional version I've ever delivered on that, but podcasteditorsmastermind.com/be a guest is the place that you would do that. And to whoever edits this, I don't know, leave the ums in, I guess. Sorry.
The best of luck to you.
Yeah, no kidding.
Good luck. Godspeed.
Well, thank you so much for watching if you're here live. Thank you so much for listening if you're catching the podcast later. I have been Daniel Abendroth. You can find me at rothmedia.audio.
I have been and still am Brian Ensminger. You can find me at toptieraudio.com. Unable to join us today was Carrie at yayapodcasting.com and also Jennifer at kypodcasting.com. But our wonderful guest was...
me, Helen King.
I love it.
Thank you very much for having me.